Let's cover the coming tech bubble. Send your thank you notes to Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen. Now, discussion of any QSIP is for discussion purposes only. Do not buy any security mentioned in this playlist unless you perform your due diligence. Note that I purchased shares of Lehman Brothers 3 days before it collapsed, so anyone following me into a trade is taking excessive risk and may lose significant financial value. In addition, at the time of this video, I may or may not own shares of the company mentioned and may or may not have kept those shares depending on what circumstances changed. So, the tech bubble, coming tech bubble that we're about to face. What started it and what's going to happen? Most tech companies create absolutely no wealth whatsoever. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of what wealth is. Wealth is anything that increases the standard of living while lowering the cost of living, or anything that maintains the standard of living while decreasing the cost of living, or anything that increases the standard of living while keeping the cost of living the same. That is what wealth is. Wealth is not increase in your bank account size. That's not wealth. Wealth is increased economic output, essentially. So, most tech companies don't. Maps applications are a case in point. There's already enough of them. But people want to create the new Maps application. Doesn't create wealth. Snapchat creates no wealth. Privacy is important, I agree, but it doesn't create wealth. LinkedIn doesn't create any wealth. And the other thing, too, is they're fungible business models. You can easily replace them, right? And then you can also replace them with robots. You don't even need humans. So that's a huge problem, okay? Well, why is this a problem? Like, if the companies don't create wealth, who cares? Like, so they don't get a return on investments. Who cares, right? And that's how some people think. It doesn't matter whether they make money or not. It doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't? Okay, well, let's think about this. iGen and millennials, iGen is Generation Z, that's what I call them. iGen and millennials are borrowing money currently to enter tech through STEM degrees. Now, they're borrowing a lot of money because they think, oh, I'm going to make $200,000 a year as a tech worker. However, if we don't need very many tech workers, then they're betting on a future that doesn't exist. The reason why I record this video, and yes, there will be people who will get very angry, is because this is going to hurt a lot of people who don't realize the effects of low interest rates, of QE, of keeping these things artificially low and blowing up bubbles. And then, of course, they burst. Industries which need workers are currently experiencing labor shortages, which might cause inflation if the workers begin demanding higher salaries. This is one of the points that a lot of people miss. You will see some people talk about tech bubbles, but what they don't understand is what could cause the tech bubble to burst and what will really amplify the problem. You'll find people who are obsessed with saying there's a bubble everywhere. That's not true. Blue-collar work, there is no bubble in. There's a high demand. In fact, what you're having right now in the West Coast port negotiations, you have a problem because those are really good paying jobs already, but they're demanding higher salaries. That's going to have a major effect. So the problem is these people who go around and claim there's bubbles everywhere, they're lying. Or they really are ignorant. They're either lying or they're ignorant. But the fact is there are places that need to fill positions and they can't get workers. So what the result is these workers may end up demanding higher salaries. For welders and plumbers start doing that, that's going to end up creating inflation. Inflation comes along, and the Fed is going to do one of two things. Either the Fed really wants inflation, which I kind of am beginning to suspect, or they're going to have to raise interest rates. If they raise interest rates, boom, you're back to a problem. Now tech starts to blow up. What happens? Now you have a bunch of unemployed tech workers. Well, what does that mean? It's going to cause unemployment in other areas. So what are they going to do again? Lower interest rates. Oh, wait, but interest rates are already low. So what are they going to do? QE? Start walking through it and you see a major problem brewing on the horizon. Now, there's always a possibility that blue-collar workers won't demand higher salaries. That's not a future that I want, though, because if they're working 70 hours a week, they have every right to demand higher salaries. Besides, why should someone who's a welder get paid less than a tech worker when we really don't need that many tech workers in the first place? Right? So from an economic standpoint, blue-collar work is more needed. I mean, you all use plumbing every day if you think about it. What I have found about a lot of these educated workers in general, through a lot of text mining, they don't want to do blue-collar work. They consider it unevolved. So they go to college and they get a negative attitude about physical work. So where are you going to get these workers from? This is not a political statement, what I'm about to say, but I suspect this is part of the reason why our politicians have kind of changed their mind about immigration. They're realizing we have a major problem brewing blue-collar workers. I'm not pro or against immigration. All I'm saying is I think that's why they're focusing on that, is because there's a problem. You know, there are plumbers that are making $200,000 a year. That means they're in high demand. It's a big problem brewing. All right, so I like to talk about solutions in these videos. So I have three groups here: college students, tech workers, and everyone else. College students, share this with your buddies. If you're in college, share this with people you care about. Stay out of STEM. Or, and this is a big one, if you're going to go into STEM, you better think, what industry or what job or what business are you going to create that's absolutely necessary? The two biggest ones right now are agriculture, especially with water. We have water shortages, right? There's a lot of opportunity. I keep saying that that's the trillion-dollar business of the future. And then the other one is healthcare. Healthcare is getting more expensive. That people are going to be looking desperately for solutions. If those are one of two that you're going into with your STEM degree, that's fine. Energy's up there too. I'll go ahead and include energy. Maps applications, apps that are like habit apps or apps that involve, there's all kinds of apps that I'm just like, these aren't needed. We don't need these apps. And sooner or later people are going to realize that, and it's going to pop. Snapchat, you know, text apps, group text apps, those also aren't needed. So the other alternative here is to look for jobs experiencing a labor shortage. There's a lot of them, right? Let's say you're 18 years old and you're about to go to college and you see this whole Port Authority issue going on with the workers, and you're like, hey, $150,000 a year. That's not bad for an 18-year-old. It really isn't, right? Go into that, right? You're thinking $150,000, that's pretty good money. Or start small. Even if you start at $80,000, again, for an 18-year-old, most 18-year-olds aren't even making $30,000. These are educated workers who are coming out of college and making $20,000 or $30,000. $70,000 or $80,000 is good money for an 18-year-old. So look for the jobs that experience a labor shortage if you're going to look for a job. In the long run, you can always do other things, right? If you're a truck driver, when I was driving around the U.S. recently, that is every single truck I passed. We need truck drivers. We need truck drivers. You don't have to be a truck driver forever. It's a good place to start. If you're getting paid $60,000 or $70,000 a year, starting out at 18, that's really good. Save a lot of the money, and then you can always do other things. Tech workers, if you're a tech worker, either start building something that creates wealth or leave the industry. Like I said, healthcare, energy, agriculture. Healthcare and agriculture are two big ones. Start working on products that solve problems in those. Just go talk to a bunch of farmers and ask them what their problems are. You can start thinking about solutions. It's a good way. Same thing with healthcare. I think all of us know exactly what's going on in healthcare as far as it's just more expensive every year. I will caution, tech workers have a temptation to short the NASDAQ or to short tech stocks to prepare for unemployment. You know, that way you can make a lot of money in unemployment. Here's a problem though. You have to get the timing perfectly. When I say that there's a tech bubble, I'm not saying it's going to burst this year, next year, the next year, the next year, the next year. It could be 10 or 20 years before it bursts. Right? Bubbles can last a long time. Alan Greenspan, even though people criticize him, he did talk about, I think it was in 97 or 96, he started to get the feeling that a bubble was starting to form. People always criticize him, but they don't highlight this about Greenspan. People blasted him for it. So what did he do? He never said anything again about a bubble. But he was actually right. In about 97, there was a bubble that was forming. And he could see it, and it's like, you know, I think the market's getting a little irrational right now. Same thing. You have a bubble, but bubbles can last a long time. And calling out a bubble will generally make you a lot of enemies, even if you're trying to say, no, I'm trying to, you know, protect people from unemployment and whatnot. Everyone else, be careful about investments with large positions in tech. I noticed Warren Buffett's recent positions, there's like 5% in tech. Remember, cash or commodity basket. Commodity, there should be an asterisk by this. It depends on the commodity, is king. Paper currency, I agree with Jim Rickards. It's increasingly becoming risky to own paper currency. But commodities, you have to be careful. Look at the commodities that do well during recessions, especially during tech bubbles, housing bubbles, and just recessions in general. There are commodities that do fairly good. What I mean by that is they don't decline too much in value. But I think like 70% cash, 30% specific commodities, look into those. That's what I prefer to do. And if you want to look into doing that, that's one thing. The other thing is just to keep all cash, right? And liquidate positions. I would be very careful, but again, bubbles can last a very long time. I am not saying that the bubble is going to burst this next year or the next few years. But eventually there's going to be pressure on the Federal Reserve, And when that happens, just remember, send thank you notes to Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen, because they definitely caused this one.